The following presentation is controversial and may be offensive to some audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome to the News with Views radio show, an extension of the newswithviews.com website where reality shatters illusion, with nearly 150 authors bringing the hottest, most pertinent, and important news and information to America. For the best news and the best commentary anywhere on the internet, you want to come to newswithviews.com. That's newswithviews.com. I'm your host, Roger Frettenberg, and here's the radio show for today. And, you know, I never was so happy, I was never so excited to realize that over the years I've been able to endorse, promote, and push as hard as I can for a group called Gun Owners of America. And a wonderful fellow there by the name of Larry Pratt. And if it wasn't for these kind of people, and I don't want to put the NRA down, but I'm just going to tell you now, if it wasn't for the Larry Pratts of the world, if it wasn't for Gun Owners of America and groups like that, I think one other group I might include over the years with them in a similar fashion would be with my friends, the Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership, whatever. A few people out there, but very few people really fight the fight. Larry Pratt's one of those guys who does it. Larry, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you here, sir. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. What a nice introduction. Pleased to be with you.
Well, I mean every word of it, Larry. You know, over the years, I wrestled a lot because I was a born again NRA guy from childhood, you know, and I struggled and I fought and I battled for years, breaking free of that addiction. But I honestly did. And it's not that I have anything against NRA. It's just that you guys are more like me. I'm an aggressive, go get 'em kind of guy. And that's how I see Gun Owners of America. You had the guy out here in Oregon, Kevin, what's his name for years? I don't know if he's still here.
Starrett. Yep.
What an awesome guy.
Kevin Starrett.
Yeah, great guy. And, you know, those kind of people that make up this family of Gun Owners of America have just always given me a certain amount of confidence that gun issues were not going to go unnoticed. And this one certainly wasn't. Tell me what they're trying to do and what is being done to stop them.
Well, in general, the Democrats don't like the fact that we the people have guns. And, of course, that's exactly why we have a Second Amendment for people like them. Now, more specifically, in answer to your question, it was obvious earlier, not this year even, but in the last Congress, that banning guns doesn't have the votes in the Congress. Dianne Feinstein, senator from California, was beat back in committee and was not able to get her semi-auto gun ban through the Senate. Even this was a Harry Reid Senate. So what we saw just recently was the administration trying to find some other door, a back door, if you will, and they came up with the idea that if they made some ammunition sound exotic enough that they could perhaps put the sell on to ban it. And they found that, well, there's this AR-15 ammo that's made differently from most bullets, and therefore it's armor-piercing. The M855, I think it is. I never even heard of that particular designation. I got lots of AR-15 ammo, and it's possible I even have some of that. I never talked to anybody that said they were going out to buy some M855 ammo, but maybe they do where they do more shooting than I do.
Right. Well, I was never a big AR-15 fan, Larry, but I got into ghost guns. I don't know if you've ever built a ghost gun. They are just so much fun to have as a project, you know?
Well, I hadn't owned one until the government wanted to ban it, and then I went out and bought several.
Yeah.
So.
No, I love them. You guys should work a deal with I got an advertiser that sells those things. You guys should work a deal and do fundraising with them. But they're a blast. You know, I go out in the garage, I've got a drill press and a XY table, and I use their jigs and a drill bit and end mills and stuff, and it does take a couple hours, you know, for each passage. But, you know, I make my own AR-15 for about $400.
Wow.
I love it.
Well, I salute you. That is not something I would do. But in any case, the argument wasn't very credible, and what the administration found is that we were onto them right away, that they weren't interested in this particular ammunition because that particular rifle round is it's no different from any other rifle ammunition, in as much as once you're talking center fire ammunition, we're not talking the little plinking 22 rim fire, you're talking armor piercing. The standard body armor doesn't withstand rifle ammunition, period. So maybe shotgun, but what I'm talking about is rifle ammunition.
Right. So my 303 British, my 303 British with a jacketed shell is going to penetrate any armor, any body armor you got.
Like a hot knife through butter.
Yeah.
So we pointed out that if they actually have any grounds that is legal and constitutional, which of course they didn't, to ban this ammunition, then they're going to be coming after all rifle ammunition for the very reason you just pointed out. The rest of them penetrate even easier than AR-15 ammo. So, because they got more punch, and they, as long as they're coming out of the barrel of a rifle, as you and I know, it's likely to have all the velocity it needs to penetrate standard body armor. It's the handgun that's limited, mainly because it has a shorter barrel and it doesn't develop the muzzle velocity that the rifle does.
Right.
And so they were after rifles at the end of the day. That's what they were trying to get away with.
Oh, I don't blame them, because I think the next revolution is going to start and be won by people with rifles and Leopold scopes. I don't think it's going to be won by guys in the trenches with machetes.
We figured that was kind of what they were up to, and the Second Amendment was designed for people just like the president and his administration. And yes, if the New York Times and the Rolling Stones and whoever else wants to have a hissy fit, yes, our guns are in our hands for people like those in our government right now that think they want to go tyrannical on us. We got something for them. That's what it's all about. The Second Amendment's not about hunting. It's not about target shooting. It's about Democrats who want to take our rights.
Yeah, and I think that based on what I've witnessed as America's kind of been in this constant slow drift towards the far left, gun owners have shown an extreme amount of patience and consideration, and it's pretty obvious that if they were violent, scary, terrorist-type people, we'd live in a completely different country right now. So I
wouldn't have as many gun grabbers walking around openly proclaiming the beauties of grabbing guns because we've committed to working politically. But frankly, if they push it to the point that it was, say, in Athens, Tennessee in 1946, the corrupt administration of that city government got so bad that it drew the guns out. And after the latest stolen election in August of 46, the militia, as it were, came riding into town, trucks and cars and rifles and shotguns bristling out the windows and the beds of the pickup trucks. And they surrounded the cop shop, and you can see this on YouTube. They've made a Hollywood movie out of it back in the day, about 1946 or 7, called The Battle of Athens. And you can search it and pull it up and look at it. It's essentially historically accurate. I can't vouch for every particular word that's spoken in the movie, but the outline is correct. And there was a brief shootout because the cop shop was surrounded by the armed populace. The cops realized it wasn't going to end well for them, so they left their guns behind and walked out. You talk about hands up, don't shoot. It was just the opposite of what those boneheads in Ferguson are talking about. It was the authorities who realized they'd gone too far, game over, hands up, don't shoot.
Yeah, no, and I think what really worries me, Larry, as an American, as a patriotic guy, I'm a child of the 60s. I like to tell people I'm the first child conceived in the 60s because I was born exactly to the minute 9 months from New Year's Eve, 1960. So I know what my parents were doing New Year's Eve, you know what I'm saying? But my old friend Lowell Pawnee tagged me as the first child conceived in the 60s. But I grew up in an America that had a lot of protest, and I went through the whole hippie thing as a child and the anti-war movement. And as it turned out, I think historically there was a lot of accuracy in the concerns that people had as they marched in the streets against Vietnam. I mean, if you look at the historical facts and realities, there was a lot of merit to the arguments people were making at the time. And that's the good and wonderful thing about America is people can rise up and protest and legally do that and express their First Amendment right. But nobody has a First Amendment right unless it's protected by the Second Amendment. And so I think people in the 60s who ended up in power, who got haircuts and bought suits and went to work for the government, they really forget where freedom comes from.
Or they're following the advice of Saul Alinsky, which was precisely what you've just said. Get a shave, put on a suit, and go to work with your views intact and work from within.
Well, they've managed, I think, Larry, to devastate our education system. Primary education in this country is a wreck. It's more of a propagandist tool to recruit people into the leftist movement. I don't know how you fight that stuff. I know it all ties together somehow. But, the thought that they would take our guns, or even now, maybe a more frightening thought is they take our ammo away. Anyway, hang on, Larry. We got to take the break here. Ladies and gentlemen, Larry Pratt is with us. Larry Pratt, of course, with Gun Owners of America. Don't forget you can email me at radioroger@aol.com, at Radio Roger on Twitter. Join in the Stop the Left-Wing Bullies movement, okay? We're being bullied, ladies and gentlemen, on every front, and the Second Amendment front is one of the most important. Larry Pratt is here from Gun Owners of America today. Hello, Larry.
Hello, Roger. Good to be with you, sir.
Larry, what I call what's happening with this attack on our Second Amendment, and if you're a Christian or subscribe to traditional Judeo-Christian American values today, you're considered a hate monger. Your First Amendment right is meaningless. The public displays of anti-Christian immorality are everywhere, including in government, and there seems to be no consideration for the faith of good people everywhere. But if you're a pervert, a deviant, a derelict, someone who's captured by, a decadent lifestyle, whatever, your rights are protected. But the good people, their rights are not being protected. So it's
quite a rhetorical sleight of hand, isn't it? They say they're for diversity, they say they're for freedom of speech, and you're free to say anything you like as long as you agree with me. What hypocrites!
Yeah, no, it's just amazing to me that we live in a country that was established by moral people. I remember de Tocqueville saying that America was a great place because the people were good, and that if the people ever stopped being good, America would stop being great. And I think de Tocqueville had it right.
I'm afraid so.
And we look at this situation today. In my view, as not just as a gun owner, but just as a patriotic American, the very thought that Hillary Clinton could be considered for president is the most debasing, immoral, ridiculous notion in modern time to me.
Except for the fact that we already have Hillary without a skirt as president. So we've been debased for some time now by a guy who, pretty much by his own words, hates the country, wants to fundamentally transform it. Obviously, he doesn't like the country the way it is, or he wouldn't be talking about fundamentally transforming it. Hi, honey, home tonight. Hey, listen, our marriage needs some fundamental transformation. Really? You're on the sofa tonight, buddy.
Yeah, no, I don't. But again, I think that you mentioned Saul Alinsky, but I think we can take these discussions clear back to maybe pre-John Dewey. They've penetrated our school systems to the point where they've radicalized children against their own ideals, their own morals, their own family substructure. Kids literally think their parents are morons, and they're taught to think that.
Right.
If your parents believe in God, they need mental help. If your parents
and the ones that you put your confidence in are those of us who are government employees, and so it's a coup d'état without having had a tank in the street.
Right. Well, I live in Oregon, even though I've been a national radio host for years. Oregon's my home base. And out here they have what's called the PERS system, Public Employee Retirement Systems. And they've even learned how to help each other game that, so that a couple of years before retirement, they promote each other. They give each other big raises because their retirement benefits are based on their final wage. So they game the system to their own advantage, and they all help each other. It's like a perpetual machine. And then the taxpayers are on the hook to pay 8% interest into this retirement system, even when interest rates for everybody else in the world are down around, like 0.00%. And it's such a sick, demented, and horrific thing, because it's fomented, perpetrated, and put upon the people by the government, for the government, of the government. It's become the government of the government, by the government, for the government, not the people. And the people are oblivious to it. That's the part that's most frightening. It's the people are oblivious to it. Hang on, Larry. We got to take a whole break. I'm sorry.
All righty.
We'll be right back with Larry Pratt. Go to gunowners.org. Larry Pratt is here from Gun Owners of America, gunowners.org. If you want to go and, do some good for the country, there's a place to start. Larry, thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. Let me just point out, too, that if folks would simply go to gunowners.org, there's one thing they can do that will cost them nothing. Can sign up at our Take Action Center for email alerts, and that will then enable them to know what's going on Capitol Hill. We'll embed an email in the alerts that they get, and they can fire those off rather quickly to their members of Congress. And I know you have a tough road to hoe in Oregon, but we have seen this kind of public input make a difference. We didn't stop gun control after Sandy Hook because I have such a pretty face.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, everywhere you go, anytime there's a gun incident that is favorable, it's completely ignored by the media. And anytime you have a gun incident that is able to make the case of the Alinskyite whack jobs, it becomes the 24/7 news cycle special. And it's infuriating to me because, and maybe we need to talk about some of the statistics, Larry. You're good at that. What is the reality about the good versus the bad of guns?
Well, a lot of people would have us model ourselves after Great Britain, where the murder rate is indeed very low. It's probably, last I saw, about 1.3 per 100,000, and nationally in the United States we're at about 4.8. So, it's a significant difference. However, what they don't tell you is that England is the fourth most violent country in the world. They have a low murder rate for sure, but rape, violent assault, robbery, all those kinds of violent crimes, they excel in, and they are right up toward the top. So the idea that being defenseless has led to a tranquil society is simply not correct. In fact, to further the point, in Fairfax County, Virginia, which is where Gun Owners of America is located, very much an urban county, right outside the District of Columbia, the murder rate is 1 per 100,000, even lower than it is in England, and yet we have guns bristling out of our ears. It's a state where you can carry a concealed firearm legally. You can carry it openly without even getting a permit. And you can, and I've seen it, people walk into stores in Northern Virginia with a pistol on their hip, and nobody bats an eye, which I find very refreshing, frankly, to think that in an urban center, people are that used to seeing other people with firearms that don't have a badge on. And we have an admirable, enviable crime rate and murder rate that even exceeds what they enjoy in Great Britain, but without the disarmament. So obviously our politicians are more nervous here than they are in England, because in England they don't have to worry about a militia forming to remove them from office. That did happen, by the way, in Athens, Tennessee in 1946, when the corrupt establishment stole one more election. And the militia came riding into town the night of the election. They knew what was going to happen. They knew, in fact, it did. The ballot. You can see this in the Battle of Athens. It's a Hollywood movie as well as something that actually happened. The ballot boxes were grabbed by the gendarme, by the cops, and taken to their cop shop where they were going to, quote, count the ballots against state law, which said that the ballots had to be counted where they were voted. And the militia rode into town, bristling with guns, surrounded the cop shop, had a brief shootout, and the cops surrendered and left the ballots behind to be counted. And wouldn't you know, the reform slate had won. That's what the Second Amendment is all about.
Larry, is anyone out there trying to record, and forgive me if you're doing it and I don't know, trying to record how many incidences daily, weekly, monthly, annually, where guns are used to protect or defend or thwart a crime?
Surveys have been done, including by the federal government, the Justice Department, and they find that some factor that's quite enormous. Let me try to get my numbers. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,000 defensive gun uses a day, where somebody says, I've got a gun. They may not even show it, or they may brandish the gun. Very seldom do they actually fire the gun, which I think says volumes about the responsible nature of the American gun owner. Maybe some 8% of the time the gun is actually fired from these data that have been collected by the government. The rest of the time, the gun is not even fired, even though it's possessed all right. But people know that if they have to shoot their gun, even if the perp runs away and nobody can even find him, let alone, God forbid, if he's dead or bleeding in front of them, that's going to be just the worst thing that could happen. The gun owner is going to be investigated. He might even go to jail in some jurisdictions, at least for a while. It's a terrible thing to have happen. And I'm not at all worried about the perp that gets shot. I'm worried about the gun owner that has to go through such an ordeal. That's what I think keeps gun owners from behaving like Pistol Pete or something of that sort. They know it's going to change their life rather dramatically. And so you don't see that kind of irresponsible behavior. You might with a gangbanger, but they get guns anyway. So gun control hasn't done them any good in England, hasn't done them any good in Europe, and it certainly doesn't do any good in, say, Chicago, which is our strictest anti-Second Amendment city and jurisdiction in the country, and it's also the crime capital and the murder capital of the country. Way to go, Chicago!
Yeah, no, it's an amazing thing. I wish there was a way, I don't know, to compel the media to have to compare the good that's done with guns versus the bad. I mean, I just wish there was some way to compel them to be, I think concealment and deception and lying in the media is not the protection our founders, invited when they wrote the draft of the documents. I think the point was to be free to tell the truth, not free to lie, conceal, and deceive.
Well, by the same token, I think some of them in the media are genuinely concerned about guns. They just don't like them, and they assume that bad things are going to happen because a gun is owned, almost giving some sort of life force to a firearm. But I'm not that charitable when it comes to somebody like Senator Feinstein, Barack Obama, Senator Schumer, the folks at the forefront of getting rid of guns, disarming the American populace. These are tyrants, and they understand that they all have sort of internalized the lesson of Athens, Tennessee from 1946. And so if they're going to have tyranny, they got to get rid of the guns. And I don't think it's an innocent, goody two-shoes, eek, it's a gun sort of reaction is what drives the Sarah Brady's of the world. Those people know what they're doing, and they have a socialist mentality. They want to control everything, and they know they're not going to control squat unless they get our guns.
Well, I hear this all the time. People say, they'll have to pry my guns from my cold dead finger, whatever that expression is. And I remember LaPierre got in a lot of trouble back in the 90s when he talked about the jackbooted thugs. But Larry, we're being conditioned, and we've been conditioned to accept the militarization of police forces. And I know that concerns a lot of gun owners when the police roll up with militarized hit squads and armored vehicles. It's just not representative of traditional American values. How does that affect?
Let me just jump in. I can say, okay, that kind of militarized police has a place in very, very rare circumstances, but to use them routinely to serve warrants in a nonviolent situation. Example, in the county south of where Gun Owners of America is located, still pretty much an urban area, a SWAT team was serving a warrant on a bookie. The guy was on his front porch in a rocking chair. And these thugs were so poorly trained that as their adrenaline is pumping and they're rushing toward the guy's house, one of the thugs had his finger on the trigger and shot the bookie dead. Now, I'm not the bookie's lawyer. I'm not for gambling. I have religious objection to it. But what he was doing was not a capital offense.
Right.
And it should have been. When I was in the legislature in the last century, I had the opportunity one day to ride around with a cop for part of his day. And at one point, it was about 10 in the morning, we pulled up to a nice suburban home, and I was in the front seat alongside him. He said, "Just stay here. I'll be right back in a minute." He went up to the door, knocked, had to knock several times. Finally, a very sleepy young man answered the door. The cop went in. About 5 minutes later, he came out with a guy in handcuffs. We took him to the precinct where he booked him on a drug charge. Today, that house would have been surrounded front and back, cop cars closing off the street. There would have been snipers on neighboring homes with their rifles trained on the front door.
All right, hold that. We'll pick it up on the other side. Larry Pratt, gunowners.org. You can sign up for free to harass your congressman with emails. Isn't that awesome? Go there to gunowners.org. We'll be right back with Roger Fredenberg and Larry Pratt. Larry Pratt. Don't go away.
Anyway, we'd better have our sights on the future, and frankly, I'm hopeful that the American people have been poked in the eye so much that there may well be a stirring. We need certainly more than a political response, but we need that too, and I'm hopeful that what has happened in the last congressional elections is going to be manifest in the next presidential election.
Is there a candidate? Is there a candidate you guys have favored at all, or are you able to say that or not?
Well, Gun Owners of America hasn't made any endorsement, at least not yet. But personally, and I think I speak for a number of the guys even on the board, that what we have seen in Senator Ted Cruz puts him really in a class by himself. There are other Republicans that are or might run who would, as far as I can tell, all of them be an upgrade from what we have. But Cruz has made appointments to his staff that are excellent. Can't always say that even about Governor Walker, who I think would be the next runner-up for the gun owners' choice. But Senator Cruz has faced the enemy even within his own party. You may remember John McCain ridiculing him, calling him a wacko bird. Well, Cruz had the right response. He went onto the Senate floor the next day and said, yes, indeed, if being a wacko bird means being pro-Second Amendment, means being pro-defense of unborn children, means defense of marriage, means limited government and constitutional government, low taxes, and he went through the whole touchstone for the Republican base, if you will. He said, well, then call me a wacko bird, too.
Yeah, no. Look, I like a lot of, I always, I come from that conspiracy crowd where I'm always a little worried. I look at people's backgrounds and I start asking questions, but I mean, at this point, we need a real Republican or a real conservative in the White House. We need someone who will do the reverse dance that Obama's done on the country. We need a Republican that'll stand up to all these liberal lunatics and say, hey, yeah, look, and pardon me, I hope I don't offend you, but read my middle finger here. It's not going to happen. And
that's exactly right. We need somebody that's going to just not buckle. And, I think in fairness, Walker has a lot of that in him as well. Cruz has faced up to this and has actually turned it back on the John McCains of his own party. And that's what I particularly have found noteworthy, is that not only does he have no trouble criticizing a socialist Democrat, when he finds a Republican that's a socialist, he treats him the same. And that, I think, is the measure of who we need to have in the White House, somebody who is going to have a tougher view, somebody who has made appointments to staff based on do they think like the way I do. And frankly, Scott Walker has stumbled even recently in that regard, whereas as far as we've been able to tell, the people that are working for Senator Cruz are people who think the way he does and faithfully represent him and seek to carry out his thinking.
Yeah, well, let's hope and pray that all comes together the way we hope it will, because I mean, I know people say this all the time. I'm not sure we could survive Hillary Clinton in the White House. I'm just not sure
if
that
we get a Republican who runs as a Republican, even a conservative, I don't think there's a Democrat out there who would be able to prevail after what the president has done to the brand name of Democrat.